Hello, gentlemen. This is Behind the Lines with Gabe and Kev, week two. We're going to jump right into this one. We're trying to keep things concise now. So we're going to go ahead and share.
Hopefully, hopefully my mic is better this week, gentlemen. I went with the Xbox headset, so trying to give better quality to for the viewership for all you fans out there. So,
Kevin's our in-house broadcaster.
well,
Um,
Gabe, kick us off.
yeah, week two. We'll go ahead and start with my matchup. I played Sam this week. It looked on the game Thursday, the Eagles Vikings, like I was gonna dominate. Obviously, Kirk Cousins dropped 36.5 and TJ Hawkinson dropped 25.6. We'll talk about that stack later. But we'll just go over the rest of my team. Obviously, Mike Williams, Devontae Smith, pretty good games, but my running backs severely underperformed, and that's a big piece of what I put my draft capital into. Clearly, Nick Chubb went down, and we'll talk about that in the future. I made a big trade at the end of the week, trading away Raheem Mostert, my best performing running back, for Michael Pittman Jr. We'll bring that up, but it was definitely a big move, and we'll see how it plays out for me in the long term. As for depth, there's some guys in there that I've picked up off the waiver wire. Nothing really of note. Um, as for Sam's team, Anthony Richardson continues to perform pretty well, but he's sustained 3 injuries over the course of 2 weeks. I believe an ankle, a knee, and now a concussion. So there's going to be a question there on how much Indianapolis is willing to let him run. Bijan, another great game, and Joe Mixon performing consistently. Anything to add, Kevin?
Yeah, I think from a league standpoint, Sam falls to 0-2 now, and next week I don't think he's going to have Anthony Richardson or Jalen Water due to concussions, and obviously Kyle Pitts is struggling. So Sam really needs to get a win next week, and he's going to be down two pretty big components of his team. So best of luck to him. I mean, it's just been a rough start for him, but tough to see Sam falling 0-2 with some injury trouble as well. And then, of course, you are now having some injury trouble, but at least you're starting off 2-0. So at least, look on the bright side of things.
Yeah, you got to look on the bright side. There is a bright note. Jordan Addison could become a solid wide receiver replacement for Sam while
Mhm.
Jalen Waddle is down with this concussion, and Baker Mayfield and the Bucks have been doing pretty good. So
Yeah,
I
he's
would,
pretty explosive. He's very solid on the deep routes. That's definitely where Kirk's been finding him is on those deep routes.
and it's clear that George Pickens is the wide receiver one with Deontay Johnson
Mhm.
gone for as long as he is. So that could provide flex opportunities for him going
That's
forward.
very true. And obviously he's got Fields on the bench, so at least he does have some depth there to help replace those injured guys for the
Yeah.
time being.
Next matchup, we have Eli versus Al, Paul Allen versus Netflix and Hill. This was a stomp fest, 146.5 to 99.8. Al's team, most of them had a stinker. He did have some injuries that he dealt with. He made a trade last week with Eli. Kind of interesting. I guess if you want to tackle this matchup and we can alternate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Eli obviously had a pretty stellar week. I think this is the second most points scored this week. DeAndre Swift kind of came out of nowhere with an insane week. Kenneth Gainwell was down in that game, and there was just a ton of offense, obviously. So really explosive week from him. And Kyron Williams, I think, is a really big name to highlight here on Eli's team. Obviously, you have star power with Tyreek and Devontae Adams. But if Kyron Williams ends up being the guy that he looks like he may be with that powerful Rams offense, just shocker to everybody. Connor Williams could be a really incredible pickup for him, and it could make his team really, really scary going down the road. The only slight issue I have with this team is Tyler Higbee, who I think is going to be kind of a disappointment this season. It doesn't seem like he's getting near the amount of targets that we thought he was going to. Then on Al's side of the ball, I mean, he's 0-2. He hasn't scored 100 points yet in a week. But kind of just hoping for better things for him. We have a bullet point in AJ Brown coming up soon, so we'll just tackle that then. And just a lot of unfortunate busts for him this week, even though there were some good situations. Like AJ Dillon should have been solid with Aaron Jones, but here we are. Hopefully better things coming for Paul Allen, but he falls to 0-2 and kind of just a rough start for him. And what was Eli's team? Netflix and
Hill.
Netflix and Hill moves to 2-0. Good start for him. Better things to come for Paul Allen.
Yeah, and a lot of the same here on my end. But tight ends around the league generally are underperforming what, not only projections are, but what we around our league thought they were going to be. Specifically, like George Kittle hasn't had many great games. Obviously, it's only 2 games into the season, but you hope for more production. Same thing with Tyler Higbee and Kyle Pitts, obviously. Al's been dealing with the injury bug pretty heavily. It hasn't affected his star players, but it's affected everybody else. Deontay Johnson down for 6 weeks, I think it is, 4 to 6.
He's gonna go
Um,
on the IR. Yeah.
yeah. Brandon Cooks down this week. He was questionable going into week 1. He's an older guy, so you assume he's going to be questionable probably throughout the rest of the season. Um, Matthew Stafford, obviously, it's not a great backup option, but Jalen Brown, I mean, Jalen Hurts has been. Sorry, switched over to Celtics talk there for a second. Um, Jalen Hurts has been healthy. And hasn't really had much injury problems, but he runs the ball a lot. So, it's only a matter of time until one of those hits hurts somebody. Amari Cooper, though, he was benched by Al this week and he put up 16. Obviously, it wouldn't have made the difference to make the win, but you would have liked to see those points get put on the board and cross that centennial mark. But I guess we'll look at next week. Also, one thing to add, Eli with the sneaky Jordan Love on the bench could be making a trade with somebody who's facing some quarterback struggles or some quarterback injuries.
Yeah, he's having a good year so far.
Yeah. Next matchup, we have Scary Terry's Big Toe versus Obsessed with Booty. 124 to 112. Obviously, this is Wyatt versus Alex. Wyatt is looking to move to 1-1, 1-1, and Alex is moving to 0-2. And you hate to see that. Alex obviously dealing with a lot of injuries and underperforming. Wyatt's team is good. There's really no way around it. I mean, he just has had some tough matchups. He obviously won this week, but it was scary coming down to the end. Wyatt had a roller coaster of emotions at my house on Sunday, going from like being a shoe-in with the lead to being down to 1% chance to win to being like up in the lead again. It was a wild ride to watch him go on.
Nice. He's getting the full swing of fantasy, the full range of emotions. It's good to see.
Damian Pierce underperforming. Obviously, we talk about that Houston offense and Jamar Chase again. This is it's gross. I mean, what is happening with the Bengals offense? We're going to talk about that, but it's just, you hate to see it.
Yeah, I want to add here a lot. I could go on a Bengals rant, but we'll just save that for now and just cover the matchup. We'll cover all that later.
Yeah. Obviously, Wyatt's got good receivers to sub in with Terry overperforming, DJ Moore overperforming, Gabe Davis overperforming, and that definitely helped him edge out Alex in the win this week. But as you get further down the bench board, it gets a little scarier. I mean, guys like Devin Singletary and Jahan Dawson are not really what you want. Cortland Sutton, there is some opportunity there, but the Broncos, I mean, they're putting up a lot of points, but they're losing. So you can't expect them to put up a lot of points against the top defenses. And they lost to the Commanders. So it's going to be a struggle whenever the Broncos play tough teams. And Alex's team is tough. I mean, Javonte Williams, Alexander Madison, both guys who are arguably the second string running back, depending on the day and the matchup against the other team. Garrett Wilson still performing well, and Justin Jefferson performing exactly, as expected. But 1.2 points from your tight end and 6.9 points from your second flex option are not going to get it done. And then on the bench, there's just nothing. It's a wasteland. And I hate to say it, but I'm sorry, Alex.
Yeah, Alex finds himself in a pretty tough situation. He doesn't have a backup tight end. His tight end gives him a stick. Like, it's Kendrick Bourne is in a starting lineup when he really hasn't proven himself this season. This is a pretty tough team to look at right now outside of that wide receiver duo. Jared Goff did have a good week, and I guess there's hope there. But you're gonna need more balance, honestly. Some more depth pieces need to be added for sure. Maybe some big trades are necessary.
Waiver wire. Some of the FAA budget's got to come out.
Yep. All right, moving on to our next game. Saquon Harris versus Riley Reed option. This is Henry versus Tal. Henry takes the win in a pretty dominant fashion here. 138.3 to 78.7. Saquon Harris moves to 2-0, and Riley Reed option, I think, falls to 1-1. I'm pretty sure they won in week 1.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and talk about Saquon Harris first. My biggest, right off the top, Deshaun Watson looked absolutely awful. So that honestly, to me, just looking at the team from the start, is probably one of the weaker points of the team, if not honestly my least favorite part of the team. I was really out on him going into the draft. I know there's some high expectations with him, but we'll see if he can get it together now. Obviously, Chubb is down, so they're going to be a pass first offense. So maybe there's some hope for D-Watt, but we'll see, I suppose. Saquon now hurt. That kind of stinks. At least he's only out for a couple weeks. But he continues to be great. He's an absolutely phenomenal player. Najee Harris sucks. I've talked about him. We have a segment on him as well. CeeDee Lamb, phenomenal. Keenan, phenomenal. Darren Waller, great. Pittman, great. Looks like he's going to be the star receiver for a pretty solid offense, honestly. If Anthony Richardson, yeah, there we go. If Anthony Richardson continues going, should be good shape for Michael Pittman. And then Treylon Burks, pretty solid outing from him this week as well. On the other side of the ball, Riley Reid option with an absolutely awful week. Really tough to watch. Josh Jacobs hasn't really lived up to the hype this season. He's been very disappointing. Hopefully he can turn things around, but now there's rumors that Cam Akers is actually talking to the Raiders. So we'll see if there's a trade there in the real NFL. But that's all rumors, of course. Jamal Williams goes down with injury. Disappointing week from Calvin Ridley. I think that he there's definitely better ways. He had so many missed passes in the end zone that could have gone his way, and it could have definitely been a better week. Dalvin with pretty much less than a stick, almost pretty much a donut. Goddard bounced back kind of after his donut last week, and Michael Thomas, decent week. Kind of just a tough time here for the Riley Reid option. He's got some decent bench pieces, but a lot of them are kind of just like shots in the dark, with Khalil Herbert. Doesn't seem like they want to run the ball in that offense. Allen Lazard is now kind of terrible without Aaron Rodgers. Dalton Kincaid's definitely a maybe. Tua's definitely a maybe. John Mechie is far maybe, and Marvin Jones Jr. is awful. So hopefully better days ahead for Riley Reid option. He's definitely got some holes in this team that probably need some fixing, some mending, but I think there's some hope. If Dalvin Cook especially can be a more important component to this team. It was definitely a really bad week for the Jets, especially both their running backs. If he can bounce back in the future, there should be some better games for Riley Reid option going forward, which is what he got in week 1.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, I was going to toss one more thing in there, which is Saquon Harris. Nico Collins is also a great addition to the bench, and Alvin Kamara coming back. So this can be a really strong team going forward.
I agree. And now we've looked at the only 3 teams that are still 2-0, me, Eli, and Henry. And it's interesting because Henry's team theoretically is only going to get stronger. He just picked up Raheem Mostert from me. That can theoretically replace Najee Harris. He has Alvin Kamara coming back after week 3. And Nico Harris obviously can sub in there for flex. And so he's got options. Obviously, you may want to move on from guys like Devin Achane and Rashad Penny. If Kenneth Gainwell stays injured, then yeah, but DeAndre Swift put on a show, and so he's definitely going to get a lot of work going forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Now we'll move on to the next matchup. Christian's own the Gibtards, otherwise Noah's team, versus Hit It Raw. Both teams are now at 1-1, and you pulled out the dub and the highest score this week, 152.9 to 119.04. As we dive in, I mean, obviously your team stomped, so we're just going to go over Noah's first. Trevor Lawrence with a significant underperforming day. Obviously, he went up against the Chiefs, and they won the Super Bowl. So theoretically, they're the best team in the league. And against Jacksonville, they didn't really look like it. They honestly fell apart for most of the game, but Trevor Lawrence couldn't get anything going. Christian McCaffrey, another incredible game, 22.5, barely overperformed. Jahmyr Gibbs is, performing about as projected, but they just don't seem to be using him enough. Like, obviously, David Montgomery has now faced some injuries, so Jahmyr Gibbs' role could extend up into that running back 1 position, but 12.6 points is not really going to do it. However, he does have some shining lights like Brian Robinson, who is consistently overperforming, putting up a dominant 28.9 in the flex. And obviously he lost the week, but it's nice to see that from some of your flex players. As for the rest of his team, Zach Ertz, Marquise Brown, those are big question marks with how good Arizona can perform against good teams. They played the Giants, who looked like garbage in week 1. So it's kind of understandable that the Cardinals could put up a lot of points. However, DK Metcalf did look good, even though he is suffering from some sort of rib injury. And then moving over to your team, Joe Burrow, I mean, he came back and finished with a like medium good score, but he just did not look good all game. Brees Hall put up a stick for you, which is just hard to see. The Jets offense just looks broken without Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, I guess it's always been broken because they didn't have Aaron Rodgers for more than 3 snaps this season. So it's tough. Uh, James Cook overperforming, though. It seems like he is the pass catching back in Buffalo. And so that's just free points for you on each reception. Amon Ra, another good game. Tyler Lockett, well overperforming, especially with that last second touchdown. It was phenomenal. Mark Andrews, great tight end performance, and Mike Evans with a 29.1 bomb, and Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp Jr., incredible waiver wire pickup by you. He definitely helped you win this week. I mean, he's a great athlete, and I can only expect that when Cooper Kupp comes back, you may have to look at moving him.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to probably see what the situation is for a week once Cup is back to kind of see how both of them do. Probably just bench Nakua for a week and then kind of move from there. But he's definitely going to be a very, very important part of my roster until Cup is back and healthy because he's in that role. And I think until something else is proven otherwise, he faced the Niners and put up 30. Until I see any different, he's going to be one of my most valuable players. Kind of how I was viewing Cooper Kupp going into the season. And then Brees Hall putting up a stick did obviously pain me. I think the Cowboys defense is really just something to kind of stray away from if you have options. That's kind of just something that we're all going to have to look at. If your team is facing the Cowboys, you need to look to see if you can bench that player. For Noah's team, MVS just as awful, but Christian Watson coming back soon. Hopefully, Jameson Williams coming back after the suspension. He should be able to have some solid key components. I really like his team over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Noah's team is a strong performing team. They put up a good performance this week, but you just dropped a bomb on him. He's got some decent bench pieces, guys like Tutu Atwell, theoretically Chuba Hubbard. I mean, he runs behind Miles Sanders, but if you're desperate, there could be flex options there. And then Jameson Williams, nobody really knows, but when he comes back from suspension, could be a valuable piece. And obviously, Christian Watson was great last year. Jordan Love looks pretty good this year. I can only imagine that he's going to have similar value. Um, it's looking a little less valuable on your team, except there are two key pieces to note. Geno Smith as your backup quarterback could be something to look at, depending on who the Bengals are playing and if Joe Burrow isn't performing well. And then beyond that, Hunter Henry, 17.2. He looks like he's Mac Jones's safety blanket, and so that could be a valuable either trade piece or just a slot in piece if Mark Andrews ever gets injured.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know Joe Burrow is dealing with a calf injury right now. So if that turns out to be anything significant at all, Geno Smith is immediately getting the start, and I can feel comfortable doing that. So it's a nice piece to have on the bench. But we'll go ahead and move on to our final matchup of the week, which was the closest game of the week: Tower of London versus Baby Want Milky. Baby Want Milky gets the victory over Tower of London with a final score of 118.5 to 114.2 in a very close fashion. Came down to the final Chris Olave play of him. I actually personally didn't see the play because I was watching the Browns game.
Saw the replay.
But yeah, I didn't even see the replay, but I do know that I'd heard that he was out by like a toe on the sidelines but it's tough. That's how it goes. Bennett falls to 1-1 and Charlie moves up to 1-1. Mahomes, great week. Zach Moss was a really big pickup. I'm not sure if he was a pickup or a draft. I imagine he was picked up by Bennett. But he had a great week. He's going to be the RB1 for sure until Jonathan Taylor gets back. Yeah, added for $0 from the free agency. So solid pickup for Bennett. He dropped 20.7 this week. And I think he's going to continue to have success. But once Jonathan Taylor comes back, he's going to be a non-factor. If Jonathan Taylor comes back, that is. But until that point, he's going to be a solid starter every week. Kenneth Walker, another great game. He's obviously the goal line option. Doesn't seem like Zach Charbonnet has any say in that backfield just yet. Maybe he will down the line, but not so far. Jerry Jeudy coming off the injury, disappointing week, but he should be fine. Travis Kelce coming off the injury, disappointing week, should be fine. JSN, still just rookie troubles. He's the third option. Obviously, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf had much better weeks than JSN, and that's probably going to be the pattern for at least a few weeks. But we'll see what goes on with JSN in that offense. But that offense did at least look better this week. So there's definitely hope there. And then Zay Flowers, another solid week. I don't think he's going to be a super explosive 30-point player at any time, but it seems like he's got a pretty solid floor. Lamar Jackson seems to trust him as the number two option on that team. So definitely better days. Drake London on his bench. He decided to bench him this week. He dropped a donut last week. Then obviously bounces back with 18 this week. Then if he'd started him over Judy or JSN, he would have won this game, or even over Zay Flowers, he would have won this game, or over. If he started him over any of his receiving options, which there were 4 of them, he would have won this game. But that's just kind of a tough beat. It's kind of tough to trust Drake London. So, that's going to be a decision that he has to ask himself every week is, can he trust Drake London? Does he want to? Maybe you play the matchup game, but you really don't know what Arthur Smith is going to do. Is he going to run the ball 80 times, or the Falcons going to fall down and maybe lose their lead a little bit and rely on the pass game a little bit more? But I think, I mean, I don't really have another point on Drake London, but it's going to be a tough evaluation every week. Sam Laporta is a great bench option. Outside of that, and Dak as well. But outside of that, definitely just some flyers and maybe some prayers for some of these guys. Maybe Roshan Johnson, I think, has talent, but he doesn't seem to be involved very much so far this season.
Yeah.
The other side of the ball, Josh Allen, big bounce back week, doing what he always does. Didn't skip a beat. I wasn't worried after week 1. Certainly not worried now.
He's washed.
Nothing more to say there. Yeah, except that he's washed, of course. David Montgomery is injured now. Charlie continues to have injury issues. That really does suck for him. He had to start Monty and Antonio Gibson and still miraculously won the game. I know Austin Eckler is clearly his RB1 and Aaron Jones is RB2. I think both are still day-to-day, hoping they're both back this week. I haven't really heard much on either of them, though, to be honest. So I don't really know any information. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, so Brandon Staley said yesterday, this is filmed on Tuesday, so yesterday on Monday after practice, he said currently there is no time frame for Austin Eckler's return. So not really what you want to hear 5 days away from your matchup, but
yeah, that doesn't sound too hopeful. That sounds like if he's not able to play this week, it's possible that he has an IR stint, which definitely stinks. Especially he's been so healthy the past couple seasons.
I know.
Very, very bad luck. Unfortunate for baby want milky. T. Higgins, huge bounce back week. 2 touchdowns. Actually kind of salvaged a decent day for Joe Burrow. So, I'm not going to say anything about the comparison between him and Jamar. But it's tough to have good weeks from both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk definitely returned to earth. Dalton Schultz, he's decent. D-Hop, I know, was kind of on an injury. And James Conner had a solid week. We kind of talked about the bench pieces here. I like the Jonathan Mingo stash. Maybe he'll turn into something. I think DJ Chark is droppable, and Russ is Russ. I never want to touch him after what happened to me last year with him. But, a good game here. This was a great matchup. Fun to watch. Fun to follow with the whole Chris Olave situation. And I like both these squads. I think a lot have some hope if Charlie can recover from the injury bug. And honestly, same with Ben, although it seems like he's kind of coming back towards some health, which is good news for him.
Yeah. And now we'll take a brief look at what week 3 looks like for everybody, kind of the key matchups going into it. So we'll just start off, and we won't even dive into the matchups or the box scores. We'll just do a dive from here, and we'll look at the projected leaders. So top, we have me versus Henry. This is a battle of the top dogs. There will only be one undefeated team guaranteed after this week. Eli could win his matchup and still leave it at 2, but obviously currently I'm projected 15 over Henry, but a lot of that could change. We have Kirk Cousins, who's playing the Chargers, I believe, and Etienne, who had a bad game. So if he has another bad one, this matchup could get very close. Obviously, it says Baker Mayfield is my 3rd highest scorer, which is not what I want to see. He's riding my bench. We have Deshaun Watson for Henry, who played like shit last night, so we'll see if he can actually do anything this week. CeeDee Lamb, who's been a great athlete, and Keenan Allen, who's been great so far. So, yeah, I think it will be a good matchup, and it will be a big dog shootout. So now you want to take the second one, and we can alternate?
Yeah, sure. Netflix and Hill, obsessed with booty, 2-0 versus 0-2. Netflix and Hill trying to remain on top, get closer to honestly just closer to a playoff berth. Being 3-0 is a phenomenal start. And obsessed with Booty, you keep dropping L's and things start to get out of hand. We're still early enough in the season where bounce backs are always possible, but you definitely want to look to try, and this is a very, very big game for anyone who's 0-2. Got to try and find the W column this week. Justin Jefferson, Jared Goff, Madison are his top three. That makes sense. I'm not going to break down his roster, of course, but you just got to get production from Jettas. Really got to get production from Jettas, and you got to get Madison to start having better games. He's been kind of a disappointing draft spot so far this season, so maybe he can bounce back this week. And then Hill, Devontae Adams, and Brock Purdy. That's exactly who I would expect to be the top. So best of luck to Alex this week. He really needs it, and of course, best of luck to Eli, and as he tries to remain undefeated.
We have Riley Reed option versus Paul Allen. This 0-2 Devil tries to avoid, 0-3 relegation. This might become the matchup of the week. It's 107.8 to 104. It's projected to be very close, and I think it's going to be. Tal's got a lot of good players on there, and again, 2 quarterbacks at the top of his point score is not really what you want to see, but it's good news to know that he's got guys that he can slot in at either position. That'll certainly be a good matchup, and Tal's going to look to move to 2-1 now. Do you want to tackle your matchup?
Yeah, sure. I've got Scary Terry's big toe, otherwise known as Wyatt. Should be a great matchup. His top three. The projected is 120.8 to 118.6 in favor of me. And I think my lineup is actually already pretty much full set, so I don't think I'm making any changes there. I'm not sure about Wyatt, but the big question mark in this week is going to be Joe Burrow's health. This has an effect on both of us, as he has Jamar Chase, who's obviously the main benefactor of Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow's big pockets now. But if Burrow's unhealthy and he doesn't play, that's going to drastically hurt Jamar, and I can just fall right back on Geno, kind of like a soft pillow. So I'm kind of honestly hoping that Burrow doesn't play this week, kind of gets a rebound. Maybe he's feeling better for week 4, and that way that kind of just takes Jamar Chase out of the fight. But this should be a really good matchup, and both teams trying to get to 2-1. Hoping not to fall to 1-2. Should be a good one this week for both of us.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say that the one nice thing about you having Burrow and Wyatt having Chase is that when Burrow throws to Chase, it somewhat negates the points that he gains for that. So
yeah, at least it negates the touchdowns. That's the big thing when you're going with the quarterback against the receiver. Obviously the PPR points aren't the same, but yeah, the touchdowns are huge.
Yeah. Next matchup, we have 2 1-1 teams ranked 6th and 5th. Baby Want Milky versus Christians Own the Gibtards. This should also be a good matchup, projected 120.9 to 114. Obviously, it's going to depend heavily for Charlie on how Josh Allen performs and whether or not Austin Eckler plays. And then for Noah's team, Christian McCaffrey's looked great. You can probably expect that again this week, but Trevor Lawrence and Jahmyr Gibbs, if they don't put up good weeks this week, he could easily fumble this game and go to 1-2, which isn't horrible, but you're one game away from 0-3. And you could, if you lose another one, go to 1-4, and then your playoff shots are looking low.
Yeah. I don't think I've got much to add, but this should be a good matchup. Hoping for a T-Law bounce back week, honestly. That's going to be probably one of the biggest highlights of this game is does T-Law bounce back? And of course, does Eckler play? Final matchup here is Tower of London versus Hawk and Ball Torture. Hawk and Ball Torture trying not to fall to 0-3. And like I've already talked about this with Obsessed with Booty. It would stink to fall to 0-3. So definitely need a good game from Hawk and Ball Torture here. There's question marks around Anthony Richardson and Jalen Waddle. So hopefully praying for their health for Sam's future here. Tower of London, we'll see how that Mahomes-Kelsey stack looks. They really haven't given us what they were drafted to be so far, yet he's remained afloat at 1-1. Obviously, Kelsey was out week 1, and he was pretty banged up week 2. So maybe that stat comes out firing this week. For Sam's case, let's hope not. For Bennett's case, let's hope so. Best of luck to these two gentlemen. Should be a good dogfight.
Agreed.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to our last segment, which is just talking points that me and Gabe sort of listed throughout the week. These are just bullet points, things that we noticed, things to kind of look at as we go forward this season. So the first thing that I talked about was AJ Brown and sort of the worries around AJ Brown. He wasn't used nearly as much as we would have liked to. He's not getting the end zone work. Last season, Devontae Smith got more targets and more receptions than AJ Brown, but AJ Brown got all the touchdowns, which is why he actually had a better fantasy season than Devontae Smith. But if those touchdowns aren't coming, then AJ Brown is going to be a serious problem going forward. And I'm curious if he's going to live up to his draft value. So just something to look at there.
As for DeAndre Swift, he's looking pretty good. Obviously, he had a horrible week one against New England. He only carried the ball one time. And then last week he carried the ball 28 times. So it seems like he just needed to get comfortable in that Philadelphia offense. He dropped 27 points. He got in the touchdown. I mean, he got in the end zone, got a touchdown, and caught 3 passes, although only for 6 yards, but that's 3 free points right there. 175 yards is crazy and 6.3 average. So it seems like he's going to be the guy, but we'll have to see how his value holds up with the return of Kenneth Gainwell. And then moving on to the next topic, we have TJ Hawkinson, and obviously he's looked incredible. I believe he's rated, yeah, tight end number one after this week. He's performing insane. He dropped 11.5 points, which isn't great. 9 targets, though, is what you'd like to see. But this week, 7 for 8 targets, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. He got in the end zone twice, and he's a big target for Kirk Cousins. Huge body in there. So it seems like TJ Hawkinson is, at least at this point, his number 2 option on the field behind Jettas.
Yeah, up next, I was going to talk about Puka Nacua, the biggest waiver ad of week one. He came out of nowhere, rookie, fifth round pick for the Rams. Obviously, Cooper Kupp goes down, and he's filling that role as honestly just as well as Kupp would in any normal week. He's averaging 26 fantasy points a game. That's without touchdowns. Of course, Cooper Kupp has probably a higher touchdown upside from what I've seen so far, just watching Puka Nacua. But I think until Kupp comes back, Nacua probably will be just as valuable as Kupp will be. Once Kupp comes back, it's going to be interesting to sort of see what the breakdown is between targets. Does Kupp or does Nacua take any production away from Kupp, maybe lowering his value at all, or does Kupp go right back to where we expect him to be at that 25 point per game range? Keep in mind that Kupp last year was the highest points per game receiver in fantasy. He didn't have the most points. Justin Jefferson did because of the injury, but up until that point, it was Kupp at number one. And right now, Nacua is currently sitting at number 2. So something very interesting to watch to see where Nacua goes come week 5.
Definitely going to be interesting. Beyond that, we have to talk about somebody who is also phenomenal but got injured in this past week. Saquon Barkley. He's currently ranked at running back 7, averaging 18.3 points a game. Carried the ball only 12 times against Dallas for 51 yards, but he caught a few passes and scored 9 points. But against a weaker defense in Arizona, 17 carries for 63 yards, a touchdown, 6 receptions, 27.2 points. And right at the end of the game, he suffered, unfortunately, what appears to be an ankle injury. And he was a non-participant at Tuesday's walkthrough practice. So it's very unlikely that he's going to play this week. And Henry's going to have to figure out some sort of replacement option at running back, which could be why he traded for Raheem Mostert from me.
Yeah, the next guy I want to talk about is Lamar Jackson. He came out week 1 and had an absolute stinker. 4.56 points, 169 yards passing, and 38 yards rushing on 6 attempts. So not only were his passing yards down, but so were his rush attempts and his rushing yards. He had 0 touchdowns and an interception and a fumble. So it was absolutely awful. But he came out week 2, bounces back, 237 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 0 fumbles, 12 rush attempts, and 54 rushing yards for 26.88 fantasy points. I'm not sure if it was week 1 jitters or if just him not having Mark Andrews maybe threw off his game. But it definitely seems that he's back to where he was and he's going to be comfortable. And it looks like he should still be fine living up to the fantasy hype. I think we drafted him at quarterback 4 off the top of my head. So seems like he's back on pace to cover that.
He was drafted 35th overall in the 3rd round, so it would appear
Yeah.
quarterback 4 makes sense.
Yeah, I think I took Burrow right after him, so that definitely makes sense.
Beyond that, you want to talk about the Giants as well?
Yeah, the Giants just had the largest comeback in franchise history. I mean, they were absolutely awful. They were down 21 or 20-0, one of the two, and they'd obviously just lost 40-0 to the Cowboys in week 1. So it was like a 60-0 points scored versus against through the first 6 quarters of the season. But Daniel Jones bounces back. I think he was actually the highest scoring player in fantasy this week with like 33 or something, 32 maybe. Had an absolutely stellar day. Giants bounce back. Their defense is egregious. So Daniel Jones could be a pretty strong starter, as well as obviously Saquon Barkley. Still kind of up in the air who their top receiver is going to be, but right now it looks like Darren Waller. But pretty cool to see their the largest comeback in franchise history.
Definitely a bright note for what appears to be a down Giants team overall this year, but we will see how they perform for the rest of the season. The NFC East is, I mean, you would say a middle of the pack division. They have two good teams in the Cowboys and Eagles who look very strong this year, besides some woes for the Eagles. And then the Commanders and the Giants, who, I mean, the Commanders are 2-0, but we know they don't have a great option at quarterback, and we'll just have to see.
They've
However,
had an easy route so far to that 2-0 start.
yes, very much so. However, we do have to talk about two players who are overperforming projections, at least, and expectations, in James Conner, who might be pretty good. He has played two, middle of the pack towards lower of the pack defenses in the Commanders and the Giants, but he's put up good points in both. And the other player that we want to talk about is Marquise Brown, who had a great week, 17.4 points. Noah started him on his roster, but unfortunately it couldn't help him get the win over Kevin. Um, and then the next point, which is kind of a big one, I've been saying it for a while, but it's coming to a head finally. Kevin?
Justin Fields, is he terrible? It's a pretty big question mark. He's looked absolutely awful so far this season. Last season, he really started off the season poorly. And then I think it was week 5 or week 6, he started coming alive, at least as a very valuable fantasy asset. Didn't help the Bears record, obviously, they still finished last in the league. And he's right back into the dumpster fire that he was at last year. So he just can't throw the ball. He takes way too long in the pocket. And if he's not running for 100 yards, he absolutely sucks. And I think he was drafted as maybe quarterback 6 or 7, something like that. So it's definitely very worrisome that a top fantasy prospect like that looks like he's going to be really bad. But to be fair, he did this last season. He still ended up at quarterback 5.
Yes, that is fair. We have to remember what happened last year, but we do have to think about the new rule changes. Justin Fields turns the ball over a lot, and currently this season he's averaging 2 turnovers a game. Interceptions are obviously -4 points now. Fumbles are still -2. But for somebody who can't throw the ball that well, interceptions can quickly eat into your point margin, and we've seen that so far through the first 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been having a very, very rough season with turnovers, especially even with the addition of DJ Moore. It has not helped his passing game.
No. Um, I'll speak to the next point. Obviously, Tyler Algier still running back rank 11 because he had a great week 1, but he completely disappeared in week 2 against the Packers. Even though he carried the ball 16 times, he only gained 48 yards, never got in the end zone, never caught a pass. And if it continues like this, Bijan could just take away that single-handed role, and they might even start working Cordero Patterson and more, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, still a lot of possibilities there. Tyler Algier just didn't have the explosives week that he did week 1 with the 2 touchdowns, especially definitely depleting from the fantasy action. So it kind of stinks that he was started in week 2, but not in week 1. That's going to be a tough decision to make each week. Our,
Definitely.
ne- our next point is the bounce back at the Seahawks. Geno looked incredible. I think he got like 27 points or so. Tyler Lockett drops 30. The offense went right back to where they were. There was a lot of worries after week 1. They looked really, really weak. Couldn't really get the ball moving in week 1, but maybe that was just some week 1 issues that they got figured out. And I think there's a lot of hope for those Seahawks offensive players going forward, which obviously there are a lot of them. So good news all around.
You want to address the next point as well?
Yeah, Jared Goff, absolutely monstrous game. Spread the ball around a lot though. I know Amon-Ra had a very decent game. I think he had like 15. I think Josh Reynolds might have caught 2 touchdowns. I think looks like he's going to have a good season until maybe Jameson Williams. There's a lot of question marks there, but that offense can move the ball, and they move the ball to everyone. David Montgomery goes out with the injury, but Jahmyr Gibbs still doesn't get the touches that we were wanting and hoping for. Week 2 rookie, it's still possible they're trying to just move him in slowly, but it was very disappointing to see the usage for Jahmyr Gibbs even after the injury. And he has yet to get a touchdown. So, hopefully maybe week 3 he'll get that touchdown. Jared Goff is an absolute animal when he plays at home in his dome. He's got the Falcons week 3 at home. Be prepared for a shootout in that game. Let's see if the Falcons defense can shut him down.
Yes. Next point, we have Christian McCaffrey, who is a fucking animal. He's running back one, averaging 24.2 points a game. I mean, he's the kind of guy that, really hard worker, first in, last out, great teammate, never any drama, kind of guy that, you might want to have a, relationship with your family.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't want my daughter to date him or my sister to date him. I'd be very happy if he came home with my sister.
I'd be open to it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be opposed. Let's put it that way.
hmm
Phenomenal game, 25.9 in week one, phenomenal game, 22.5 in week two. He's awesome. He's going up against bad defenses for the next 2 weeks. However, in week five, he does play the Dallas defense. So that's something to look out for Noah.
Yeah, and that kind of segues us into our next point, which is the Cowboys defense is absolutely elite. That's 2 weeks in a row they've absolutely stomped defensively. They let up 0 points to the Giants in week one, and I think was it 10 points to the Jets in week two, and that was only on a fluke play to Garrett Wilson for like a 68-yard run, catch and run for a touchdown. So they've just been absolutely stellar. They held both Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook to less than 1 point scored in this in their fantasy matchup. So they could be something to look out for when your running back is going up against them. Although to your point on Christian McCaffrey, he's obviously you're going to start him every week, but I think that's the ultimate test to see if a running back can ever be productive against them. Because if he's not, I think it's an instant start or an instant bench every single week when you see the Cowboys against your running backs. Our next point is Joe Burrow. He looks a little bit better. He looked at a very bad first half. Um, Started off very terribly. He ended up getting 2 touchdowns to kind of save his week with 17. So he ended up having a pretty average week. T. Higgins had a huge bounce back. He went from having a donut to a 28 piece, I think, is what he finished with. So a solid week from T. Higgins, obviously. Woes around Jamar Chase continue. He has yet to crack 10 points in a single week, and he's been absolutely just absent on the field. Joe Burrow's missing targets, and Jamar just hasn't been able to get any fantasy production related to that fact. I'm not sure if it's the Joe Burrow injury or if they're just still having a lot of miscues on offense, but they definitely need to get it together. And, they're 0-2. Changes need to be made there. They need to figure something out. So it's a shame to see the number 2 overall pick continue to look like he was an 8th-round pick.
Yeah, and it really is unfortunate. I mean, to see how promising he was, and it's just not, he's not putting up the numbers so far. I mean, I do think the Bengals offense is going to bounce back. We said this in week one, but it remains to be seen. As for the Chargers, their pass offense is incredible. Keenan Allen goes off for 31.1, 8 catches for 111 yards. However, the Chargers have a horrible defense, and that has bit them in the butt both weeks. They've gone 0-2 to start the season, and it's looking like the same old Chargers under Phillip Rivers. You've got a great team, but you just fall apart in the key areas that it takes to win. I think Keenan Allen's going to have a great season. I believe you agree. And I think Mike Williams is going to have good wide receiver 2 value as well.
Yeah, and I think to that point, just their horrible defense makes for just better fantasy options all around because their offense is going to have to continue to drive the ball. Of course, Eckler was out for this week, so both little bump to both receivers, but there's plenty to go around, plenty for this offense, and I think all can profit from that poor defense.
Yes.
To the next point, it's Baker Mayfield, man. He looks incredible. Maybe back to the Baker of old that we hadn't seen in a few years, but he's getting the ball to Mike Evans. It's his clear favorite target. Mike Evans was a pretty late round pick, and he's gone nuclear. He's averaging 24 points per game. He's been absolutely stellar, and I'm curious if Baker can keep this up or if eventually he's going to crumble. A lot to be seen there, but so far he looks really good, and the Bucs look like a pretty solid team, which is shocking. And they're still passing at the high rate that they were last season with Tom Brady.
Do you want to discuss the Deontay Johnson, and then I'll discuss Chubb, and then we can rotate?
Yeah. So another point was Deontay Johnson's placed on the IR for 4 weeks. It's the first major injury that we wanted to talk about. We did talk about Saquon, but there's no IR stint for him, at least not yet. But Al's running out of options at receiver. I need to pull up his team here, but I know we looked at it a little bit earlier. He's just running a little bit thin. I know he's got those 2 Browns options for receivers, and
I've got it on my screen.
he's got AJ Brown, OBJ. So it's running thin for him. Going to be tough for him to bounce back, and definitely a tough injury to have. So we'll see what he can do here to fix this issue, but definitely tough to see Deontay Johnson go down for 4 to 6 weeks this early in the season.
Agreed. I mean, it is really tough whenever you draft him to be your running back two. I mean, your wide receiver two or three. Probably, flex one or two for Al's team, and then he falls like this. He's an older guy too, so it may take longer to recover. Next point is obviously going to be Nick Chubb. He sustained one of the worst injuries that's ever been displayed on live football, and because of that, 4% of leagues have, I mean, 4% of teams who have him have already dropped him overnight. Um, Brutal injury ends Chubb's season. Obviously, it's over. I'm still just holding on probably for a week or two because nobody else can fit in the IR. Kevin Stefanski confirmed that Chubb's going to undergo season-ending surgery, and it does look like it's going to be a leg break, or a knee dislocation combined with 3 to 4 different ligament tears in the same leg that happened to him in college. We hope that this isn't going to be career ending for him. He is one of the best running backs of all time, and I mean theoretically going to be a Hall of Famer. He's averaged 5.3 yards over his career, which is insane. And it's just really tough. Obviously, that's going to put some fantasy value to Jerome Ford in the waiver wires and potentially even Pierre Strong Jr., but it remains to be seen what Nick Chubb's future will hold.
Yeah, it's also just really sad just for the sport of football, and he's a great guy, and it really, really is tragic. I mean, that offense ran through him. He's been such a great player. He's obviously a Georgia grad. I know there's a lot of fans of Chubb in this group. So really, really sad to see a guy go down like this, and just another season-ending injury that we're having to bear through. And I think that's like the sixth RB injury that we've seen, and the second season-ending RB injury that we've seen. Definitely just sucks for the sport of football and just in general. And prayers out to Nick Chubb.
Yeah, for real.
But that's all that I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about it. Obviously, Najee Harris looked horrible. We think that his job has been stolen by Jalen Warren, who's on your team. We'll see what happens in week 3, but I think Najee Harris is bad, and you've thought that he's bad too. I mean, ever since he was drafted, I never thought he was good.
Yeah, I think he's on kind of a ticking time bomb here. He had 2 runs late in the game that were one went for like 18, one for like 15. So maybe he kind of saved himself a little bit, but up till that point, he looked really bad last night. Warren had like 60 yards after the catch, so just a much more explosive player. I'm sure Najee's got a couple more weeks in him, but if he continues down this path, it's going to be a pretty short path. He'll find himself at the end pretty quick.
And then beyond that, the only other point was, Bennett losing by an inch. We talked about it. If he had started Drake London over any of his 4 receivers, he would have pulled out the dub. And it's just tough. You hate to see that, especially when you pick up good waiver pieces like Zach Moss, and then you draft good, and Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey are back and healthy and performing, and you still lose. 1-1 though isn't the end of the world. Obviously, you've got a matchup important coming up in week 3. Can move to 2-1 and get that ship going in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. Just poor, I mean, unlucky fantasy decisions, poor fantasy decisions, whatever you want to call them. They're always going to cost people some games. This seems to be like the first case in which it definitely cost Bennett a game.
Yeah. Well, that about does it, fellas. That wraps up Behind the Lines with Gabe and Kev for week 2. So we'll let you guys know next week. If anybody wants to be the first guest, I think Eli has taken if anybody wants to be the second guest, I think Eli's taken the first spot next week just because he's my roommate and that's going to be easiest. But we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening, guys, and best of luck this week. Good luck on the waivers tonight. I know you'll hear it tomorrow, but good luck.
Have fun, everybody.